Hi folks, Dana here from Hydroside. What we're going to do today is we're going to run through the basic troubleshooting in the event that you've got a machine that doesn't want to take off when you're giving it a go command. Now the first step is to check your remote. If your remote's on and the green light at the back of the machine is on, it's safe to know that the communications have been established between the two. But if your remote's on and that green light doesn't turn on in the machine, one would be to check the charge level on your remote. And if that's okay, next would be to check your antenna connection at the unit. If this is broken in any way, then the green light won't turn on between the remote and the machine. If that all looks good, we're going to move on to step 2. We're going to pop the hood and take a look underneath. So now that we've got the hood popped, we're going to run through the rest of the diagnostics of your machine in the event you're giving it a go command and it doesn't want to take off. Now, if we establish that the communications were all working correctly, that's great. But if you still had an antenna connection issue and you confirmed that the antenna was properly fastened at the base of the unit outside of the hood, the last place you can check is just below this 9-pin connector. There's a brass fitting where you can check the last connection point for your antenna to make sure it's properly connected into the control box. Now, if you have no problems with the communications between your remote and the machine, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a peek inside and you'll see blinking red light on this control board and a green light on your motor controller. If those aren't on, we'll talk about those in a second, but if they're not on, what we want to do is we want to check our batteries because we might just have a bad battery or somehow the charging circuitry is a little buggy on us. Now, if you've got a voltmeter, you can go ahead and touch off on those. It's 24 volt wired in series, two 12-volt batteries in series. So you really want to see a voltage north of 24 volts. 25.8 would be considered, perfectly topped up for a 24-volt system. But what's a very handy tool is that our charge controller has Bluetooth functionality. So you can connect to that for free with your cell phone if you're nearby to your machine, and that'll give you a great diagnostic tool to check the solar performance as well as the battery health and the battery condition. Now click the link below to learn more about that because that'll be a deeper dive into that component. It's only about a minute and a half long, but it's going to be a very valuable tool for you in the future. Now, if everything in the battery and the charging system appears to be working correctly, then the first diagnosis we'll be making will be with our main board, the PCB. Now, we're looking for a blinking red light. We call it internally at Hydroside the heartbeat for that PCB, and it's a pretty rapidly flashing red light. If you see that, that's a good thing because that means that particular component is happy. Now, before you move to the next component, just visually observe and just make sure that there's no loose wires that have pulled out of the PCB connections. No need to go in and actually test those connections because they are quite stable, but just visually observe to make sure nothing's loose in there. Now, if that all looks good, next we're going to be looking at the motor controller, which is that big blue brick in the back of the control box. Now, the motor controller has an LED light in the upper left-hand corner of it. That LED light should be green. Now, when you give the machine a go command, if that blinks a series of green or red lights, then that's giving you an indication. That's flashing an error code to you. What we'll have in the link, as a link in the description below, is a link to the AllTrax owner's manual. So then that way you can figure out what that error code might be communicating to you, and we can help troubleshoot and diagnose from there. Now, assuming we have a heartbeat, assuming that we have a motor controller with a solid green light, the next thing we'd want to check would be the connections in your main and reversing contactors. And if all of those appear to be at least solidly connected, then we'll move outside the box. Outside the box, on the upper right-hand corner, is where the motor will connect into the box, and it's the gray and black Anderson connectors. Now, if these appear to be solidly connected, then what you can do is you can disconnect them and take a peek inside to see, to ensure that the Anderson pins are properly seated and nothing looks like it's pushed back or out of place. And if everything looks good, you can reconnect those and make sure they're solid. And you can do the same thing with the batteries right below to make sure you have a solid connection there. And the last place that we'll check will be this 9-pin automotive connector. Now, this is where the e-stop on the outside of the hood connects into the system. So if this is loose for any reason or it's not connected properly, then that would act as though the e-stop's been pushed and it would de-energize the machine. But if you have a bad connection, the machine could be turning on and off and actually power cycling. So you want to make sure that this 9-pin is properly seated and fully engaged. Now, if you're still having issues, then we can assist with further diagnostics. If there might be an issue with one of your motors, it would be a rarity because we've had very few. I don't even need one hand to count the number of failures we've had in the motors themselves, but it could be an issue. And then also we can help further diagnose if it is of concern that we might have a control board issue as well, despite having the good heartbeat. But those would be all of your key steps to making a diagnosis to find out what might be going on with the machine if you're giving it the go command and it just doesn't want to take off. Remember, it's usually going to boil down to the communications between your remote and the machine, or it's going to be an internal component where it's getting the signal, but it's not distributing it correctly to get the machine to go. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to give us a call at Hydroside or reach out to your local dealer, and we'd all be happy to help you.